Hey guys, welcome back to the 8th episode of my Fixing American Democracy series. We are well in the fight to reimagine American democracy for generations, and I mean generations to come, where we will ultimately create a government that's truly by, of, and for the people. And in this 8th episode, this is going to be all about talking about where I will be sharing my modernized electoral college system. And as you may remember from the first part, episode 7, where I talked about preserving the electoral college, where I shared my reasoning why we should preserve it. One of those reasoning is that America is not a democracy, is that we value individual rights over democracy. And that's always with that individual rights and democracy will always be at odds with each other. And individual rights is something that we will always value over democracy as Americans. And as well, another reason that I made in part 1 is that I talked about that it preserves federalism. The Electoral College is all about federalism and recognizing that all states are different, that they are their own individual sovereigns. And as well, I also talked about it forces all presidential candidates to put together a national coalition from diverse groups where they may be unified on some principles, but on other issues they might not be so unified on others. And as well is that it rewards all political parties to keep expanding their map, to building a bigger coalition, that ultimately where they will ultimately win more states and win more electoral votes in the Electoral College. But before I begin, I want to thank my 2 viewers that did participate in my mock U.S. presidential election. And based on all the results, it's a complete blowout for Tulsi Gabbard. She received 100% of the Electoral College vote. It was a complete blowout. I was really hoping for more people to actually vote in this mock U.S. presidential election. I tried to promote it on Twitter and in other people's channels to get more respondents. I wanted to be a little bit more fair, but this is the overall. This is how you guys, my 2 viewers and me, all voted, and this is based on the results. Tulsi Gabbard wins my mock election with 538 electoral votes, and that's my overall. This is my overall result. But I want to say thank you to my 2 viewers that did participate. You guys are truly in the fight to fixing American democracy for generations, and I mean generations to come. So once again, thank you, and let's keep reimagining America for generations, and I mean generations to come. So, and in the 8th episode, this is all about reforming and reimagining the Electoral College, and this is the second part. And before I talk about my modernized electoral college system, we first, like what I said in my healthcare video, we have to understand our current system, the current system that is under our electoral college system, and that is the fact that most states use a winner-take-all method, which means that a candidate with the most votes gets all the states' electoral votes. So it's winner with the most votes gets all the states' electoral votes. But the only exception is in the state of Maine, where they were the first state in the union to use ranked choice voting in the 2020 presidential election, where a candidate can't get just the most votes to win Maine at large's 2 electoral votes, or win Maine's first congressional district get that 1 electoral vote. They have to win. They have to receive 50% of the vote in the state of Maine, in Maine at large, or in Maine's first congressional district, or in Maine's second congressional district to win their state's electoral votes. And as you may know, as what I said before, as ranked choice voting works, you have to rank all the candidates in order of choice. Where you rank your favorite candidate as their first choice, you rank your second favorite candidate as their second choice, your third favorite candidate as their third choice, and your least favorite candidate will be at the bottom of your ranking. And the state of Maine was the only state to use ranked choice, and that forces all presidents forced both Trump and Biden to receive 50% to carry at least 1 electoral vote from the state of Maine. So it was the only state that used ranked choice voting. But all the other states, except for Maine and Nebraska, All the other states I count, like my home state of California, West Virginia, and even the Commonwealth of Virginia, uses a winner-take-all system where it's pretty much the candidate with the most votes gets all the state's electoral votes, meaning you can get at least 40% or sometimes 30 to 20% of the vote in one state to get all the state's electoral votes. And some advocates that do argue this and some people say that's a completely unfair of a system, and I have to completely agree, because no candidate should be elected should win all the state's electoral votes just by receiving 48% or 30% of the vote. You should have some broad appeal, and it should also be proportionally allocated. And Maine and Nebraska use a congressional district method that divide up their electoral votes, where they have a one at-large district where that has 2 electoral votes. So if you win Nebraska at large, you only get 2 electoral votes, and if you win Maine at large, you get 2 electoral votes. But if you win one congressional district in either Maine or Nebraska, you get 1 electoral vote. For instance, in 2020, Joe Biden won 3 electoral, one Maine at large and Maine's first congressional district, where he won 3 electoral votes for Maine. But Donald Trump in 2020 won Maine's second congressional district, picking up that last remaining electoral vote. Same happened in Nebraska. Donald Trump won Maine, Nebraska at large. He won the other 3 congressional districts, which means he won 4 electoral votes in Nebraska. But Joe Biden sneaked around and won Nebraska's second congressional district, picking up that 1 remaining electoral vote. That pretty much sums up our current system. And based on the first part, it's all about federalism here. That's what the Electoral College is all about, and that's what the founders created. The states are the laboratory of democracy. They can create their own voting structure. They can create their own rules of how the elections should be in their states, because they are their own individual sovereign. And as I said before, what works for one state might not work for the other state as well. And now, since we know the current voting system, where some states use winner take all, first past the post voting, where winner with the most votes gets all the state's electoral votes. Some states like Maine use ranked choice voting, and Maine and Nebraska also use a congressional district method. Let's talk about my modernized electoral college system. Based on all of our current system, let's not. Sorry about that. I wasn't ready to talk about my modernized electoral college system. But overall, the founders' vision, even though I'm a proud supporter of what they did for our country, it's still imperfect. It still has some problems that needs to be fixed. And as one person once said, we are still always striving for a more perfect union, that we are always striving to keep working hard and keep building a more perfect union for all Americans, to make it fair for all parties and for all candidates and for all people in this country, to making sure everyone has the power to at least govern a bit on the issues that are most salient to them. And as the current voting structure that the founders did envision, that they did create, with winner take all, where the states can do their own things, there is pros and cons to each. And now let's actually talk about. And now, is there a solution to this problem? And that's where my modernized electoral college system comes into play. Say hello to the Electoral National College Vote, or in other words, ENCV. This is essentially my modernized electoral college hybrid, which is a hybrid of proportional and majoritarian. This actually installs a proportional allocation of electoral votes with candidates that received 5% of the vote in any of the state's popular vote, plus Washington, D.C. will get an electoral vote. This is ultimately there to ensure a proportional outcome in the Electoral College. It provides voters with more choices instead of being stuck with that provides more choices instead of voters being stuck between 2 candidates, and still ensuring that this ultimately still ensures that a presidential candidate that ultimately wins the election is still elected with a majority of the Electoral College vote. And now let's talk about how ENCV actually works. Just like our current system, it's still broken into pieces. Like what is now under our current system, it's like a puzzle, and how you put those pieces together is how the president puts together a national coalition. And but the difference with this current, the difference with the current system is that but the difference under this new electoral college system, but from our current electoral college system, is that each voter in every state under ENCV will get 2 votes. On the first vote that will appear on the left side of the ballot will be a proportional allocation of electoral votes in your state. And under the first vote, you rank all the candidates in order of preference. We count voters as first choice votes first, and if some candidates do have 5% of the vote, they will earn some electoral votes. But if some candidates have limited support, then the candidate with the fewest votes in one state will be eliminated from that state's popular vote, and those voters that selected that candidate as their number 1 choice in their first vote will have their next choices counted. This is ultimately there to make sure that no one's vote is wasted, and it's fair, and it will produce a lot more fairness for all parties as presidential candidates, and it will as well achieve a fairly proportional result in all regions and in all states and in all jurisdictions, like California, like West Virginia, like South Carolina, and like the District of Columbia. It's popular vote election for president. It's there to achieve a fairly proportional result for all parties, to make it fair for everyone in this country. And as well, I know what you guys may be saying. There are several flaws. One of those flaws is when based on my 5% threshold to win electoral vote. I know some people might bring up the argument that Montana and Vermont and South Dakota, North Dakota, and Wyoming only has 3 electoral votes. And how can you give multiple candidates electoral votes when there's only 3 electoral votes in some states? Well, if you guys watched my in one of my earlier episodes where I talked about mixed member proportional, I brought up the idea. One thing mixed member proportional introduced was overhang and balance seats, which is pretty much extra seats in the Bundestag, extra seats in the House of Representatives. So this ultimately means that since under our current electoral college system, and that will still carry over to the electoral national college vote, with the overhang and balance seats, some states might not have, some states like Vermont and Wyoming might not always have 3 electoral votes, meaning they might have 4 or 5 sometimes because of the overhang and balance seats to achieve a proportional outcome in the House of Representatives, while also still making sure that every directly elected member still gets a seat in the House. So this ultimately translates very well because based on our current system with 538, it's 435 electoral college votes, 100 electoral college votes, plus the 3 electoral votes that DC gets, equals their 538 electoral votes. It's pretty much it is comprised of the 100 senators and the 435 members and the 3 electoral votes from DC, and it still carries over with that. And with the overhang and balance seats, some states like Vermont might not have the same electoral vote sometimes, which means ultimately the majority threshold from 270 might be different, vary in every presidential election. So it might change in every presidential election very frequently. And but overall, I'm completely fine with this. But not to get off topic here. Ultimately, from the first vote, it's there to achieve a proportional allocation of electoral votes and fairly and achieves a fairly proportional result in any of the states in each of the 51 individual jurisdictions popular vote elections for president. And it's there to also to make sure that no vote is wasted and it's fair to all parties presidential candidates. I know what you guys might, but another major problem that you guys might be pointing out with proportional is that under mixed or proportional, parties might not have actually not have enough seats to actually govern, and they have to form a coalition government. And yes, under electoral national college vote, this is the same principle because under the first vote, and thanks to if we had like 4 or 5 candidates or 8 candidates, it might prevent someone from getting an overall majority. You might not have a clear majority winner. like what happened in the 1824 presidential election, where no one had a majority in the Electoral College, where the House had to hold a contingent election on February 9th, 1825, that ultimately elected John Quincy Adams president of the United States, and John C. Calhoun, I could be pronouncing it wrong, vice president of the United States. But ultimately, under the Electoral National College vote, the vote does not go to Congress. It does not go to the lower chamber to elect the president of the United States. It does not go to the Senate to elect a vice president. But under this system, because like what I explained earlier, that since every voter gets 2 votes in all states, the second vote, I'm going to read it right here. If no presidential candidate doesn't have a majority in the Electoral College, then we move over to the voter's second vote after the proportional allocation of electoral votes is finished with being allocated to all the candidates that did receive 5% of the vote. The second vote would actually appear on the right side of the voter's ballot. And how the voters in all states plus DC fill out their second vote is by ranking the same candidates that they ranked in order of choice in their first vote. And how the second vote applies is once we do apply it, and we do move over to the number 2 vote in part of the ENCV, is that the candidate with the fewest or least electoral votes will be eliminated from the race overall. And those voters that rank that candidate first in their second vote will have their next choices counted. And that candidate's electoral votes will be redistributed to other candidates based on the voters' next choices in their number 2 vote, which is on the right side of the ballot. And before I begin on the walkthrough of how the Electoral National College vote system will work, here's what a ballot will look like. And do you guys see something familiar? It's the candidate that you voted for in the mock presidential election. This is not how I voted. It's what one of my viewers one of my 2 viewers voted, and I encourage you to guess in the comment section below who this viewer is who voted this way, and who voted Tulsi Gabbard as their first choice, and Joe Biden as their second choice, Ventura as their third, Walker as their fourth, and Donald Trump as their 5th choice. I guess I encourage you to guess who this viewer is. But as you see, this is what a ballot will look like under the Electoral National College vote. And as you see in the left side of the ballot, that's your first vote. And as the description says, you have to rank all the 5 candidates in order of your choice, and whoever gets 5% threshold, and the 5% threshold is needed to earn one of California's 55 electoral votes. And they first count your first choice votes based on how my viewer voted in the mock election. Since Tulsi Gabbard was his first choice, that would be, we first count his first choice. We first count all voters as first choice votes. And if some candidates have reached the 5% threshold, they will earn some of California's 55 electoral votes. But if there's still some candidates that don't have the 5% threshold, that didn't receive 5% of the vote in California, then the candidate with the fewest electoral votes that have the least support will be eliminated from the race, and those voters that selected that candidate number 1 will have their next choices counted, and that process will keep continuing until you have until you have a fairly proportional popular vote election result in California to achieve more of a proportional outcome in the Golden State. But like what I said before, if no candidate has a majority electoral, after all the first votes from the left side of the ballot, after all the proportional allocation of electoral votes is allocated, if no candidate has a majority in the Electoral College, then that's when we move over to the number 2 vote that you see on the right side of the ballot. And as my viewer voted in the first vote, his votes are reapplied in the second vote. It's the same candidates in order of choice that he ranked on the left side of the ballot. And this is how it occurs. This vote will only occur if no candidate has a majority in the Electoral College, which means the candidate with the fewest Electoral College votes will be eliminated from the race, and those voters that selected that candidate as number 1 will have the next choices counted. And this process in the second vote will keep continuing until we have one candidate that has a majority Electoral College. So now let's go through a walkthrough of how the system works. Based on the mock presidential election, and I know this is not the actual election result that I showed you in the beginning of our mock election, because I manipulated data to help me explain to help me explain the system, to help me explain how ENCV will all work. So under our mock election, as you see, the proportional, we first have to proportionally, all the states have to proportionally allocate all their electoral votes to the candidates that receive 5% of the vote in their state. So that's the first step we have to do. As you see, right now, no candidate has to, after the first vote, and all the electoral votes are allocated proportionally based on the candidates that received 5% of the vote. No candidate, as you see right now, no candidate has a majority. Donald Trump, on the other hand, has the most electoral votes, but no majority. He has 165 electoral votes. So what do we do here? That's when we move over to the number 2 vote that are on the right side of the ballot, as you saw earlier. So Bill Walker's 20 electoral votes, the independent candidate, will be eliminated from the race, and those votes that selected that candidate number 1 in their number 2 vote will have their next choices counted. And his 20 electoral votes will be redistributed to based on what the voters ranked as their second and third choice. So his 20 electoral votes are redistributed, and it's a drum roll. And after his electoral votes are redistributed, as you see from here, no candidate still has a majority in the Electoral College. So that is where we eliminate Jesse Ventura from the race, the Green Party presidential candidate, and his 41 electoral votes are redistributed based on voters' second choice that they ranked on the right side of the ballot. So his 41 electoral votes are redistributed, and as you see, still no majority. So Joe Biden is now eliminated from the race, and his 154 electoral votes are redistributed. We ran the tally again. We run the tally again one more time, and guess what? Tulsi Gabbard wins our mock election yet again with 349 electoral college votes. And that's pretty much how the electoral national college vote system works. And before I talk about the advantages and pros under this system, here's what from the night I'm going to be going into what ENCV would actually look like based on the past presidential elections, starting from 1960 to the 2020 presidential election. This is what ENCV will look like under the 1960 presidential election. And so as you see, no candidate has a majority in the first vote. So those 2 third-party candidates, once they're eliminated, then we move over to the number 2 vote. And after the number 2 vote, we see that John F. Kennedy receives a small majority in the Electoral College. So this is what it will look like. This is what it would look like in the first vote, 1960, and this is what it will look like in the second vote under ENCV. This is what it will look like in the 1964 presidential election. Still, no need for the second vote to be initiated. And look at 1968, the second vote we apply the second vote. That's what it would look like, and it looks a lot different from our current electoral college system from winner take all, because of the proportional outcome. But it actually fairly represents it fairly. How would I put this? It better reflects the overall popular vote nationally, and also as well reflects the popular vote in the states as well. And that's ultimately going to be a good thing, because it may help give voters more confidence and integrity, but as well, it makes voters feel like they have a real voice in the Electoral College. And as well, this is what it will look like in the 1976 presidential election, same as the 1980 presidential election with Reagan's landslide. And this is what it would look like in the 84 presidential election in Reagan's massive Electoral College landslide. But the only difference is he doesn't get 500 electoral votes. He only gets 334 Electoral College votes. But it's still a landslide nonetheless, but it's a lot smaller of a landslide than what he did under our winner-take-all system. As well, this is what it will look like under the 1988 election. Yet again, no 400 electoral votes. And I want to be clear here, under the Electoral National College vote system, from all these results from these historical presidential elections, no candidate actually gets 405 electoral votes. They only get around 300, only to 200 electoral votes. But it overall does better reflect the popular vote overall. This is what it will look like in the 1992 presidential election. Still no majority. Second vote is applied. It's what it will look like. This is what it will look like in 1992. This is the 1996 presidential election. Second vote is applied again. That's what it looks like again. And this is what it actually looks like in 2000. And coincidentally, guess who wins this time? We have a different winner. Al Gore wins based on my electoral national college vote system. He actually wins with 277 electoral votes, and he also flips Montana, Alaska for the first time since 1960. As well, this is what it will look like in 2004. So it's a lot more of a smaller electoral college win for George W. Bush, and this is what it will look like in 2008. Yet again, a small electoral college win for Barack Obama because he doesn't get 365 electoral votes. He only gets 283 electoral votes, but still better reflects the popular vote nationally and in all states. And as well, this is what it will look like in 2012. He's still getting fewer electoral college votes, but still a smaller electoral college win for President Barack Obama. And as well, this is what it will look like in 2016. Again, no kid has a majority in the electoral college, and then we go over to the second vote, as you learned in the walkthrough. This is what it will ultimately look like. Donald Trump would eventually win based on the second vote, getting 274 electoral votes. And under this system, he would also win the national popular and the electoral college vote as well, receiving both a majority in the electoral college and the national popular vote. This is what ultimately look like in 2020. No need to initiate the second vote because Joe Biden already has a majority in the electoral college based on the first vote, the proportional allocation electoral votes. But overall, the advantages with ENCV or the electoral national college vote is that it allows voters more choices in which they can vote for their favorite without fearing that they're going to accidentally help elect the candidate that they like the least. As well, better reflects each of the 51 individual jurisdictions population because like in deep blue states and deep red states, Democrats will still get some electoral votes in Republican states. Republicans might still get electoral votes in Democratic states because of the proportional outcome. As well, under this system, it still preserves our constitutional system that the founders put in place, which establishes a federal union that still respects states' individual sovereigns and still allows states to run their own individualized popular vote elections for president. As well, ENCV will still force all presidential candidates to make the rounds going to all the states plus DC to bring a unified message, which means under this system, because of the proportional allocation, this will force all the presidential candidates to campaign everywhere. They're not just going to campaign in a handful of battleground states anymore in every presidential election. You're always going to see them campaign everywhere, visit all the states to bring a message of unity for all voters and for all Americans as well. And this ultimately means no party can't neglect any voter, can't neglect any state anymore. They can't write off voters anymore to think that state or those voters in that state is safe for them. Because with proportional, they have to campaign in their safe. They have to campaign in a state that they might consider safe now. Because Democrats, it might not make sense for Republicans to campaign in Washington D.C., but if they can campaign just a little Washington D.C., they might get some electoral votes, which will ultimately help them get to the majority threshold to be elected president of the United States. As well, it still forces all parties to keep expanding their map and building a bigger coalition with their opponents' voters. And so they can win more states and win more electoral votes when winning a candidate for an election or re-election. As well, it also better reflects the overall popular vote nationally. And as well, and just like based on what you learned from the number 2 vote, and this system allows voters to have 2 votes, is that it gets rid of the purpose of the U.S. Congress holding a separate contingent election of electing the president and vice president if no one has a majority in the electoral college. But overall, this overall system is there to allow voters more choices, but as well, it's to get all parties and candidates to campaign to employ a 50-state strategy and to campaign in all states plus the District of Columbia. Because honestly, in my opinion, when we have an electoral college system that allow that where parties are no longer neglecting any state or writing off any voter, we are creating a far more perfect union. And that's good, because it's a bad thing when parties and candidates are just neglecting their states or writing off some voters because they think it's safe for them. When that's never really true, because what we saw in the 2020 election, where Donald Trump flipped Zapata County for the first time in decades, for the first time since Warren G. Harding. That shows you that voters are not easily won over. But under the Electoral National College bill, this will increase that incentive for all parties to no longer neglect any state or write off any voters, regardless if it's safe in their column. Because based on the proportional outcome, this will promote a 50-state strategy more frequently, and will force every presidential candidate to campaign everywhere. But overall, let me hear where you guys stand in the comment. Let me hear what you guys think about the Electoral National College vote. Do you guys agree with my modernized Electoral College system? Do you think it's going to be something that can actually ultimately fix the Electoral College? And do you actually agree with it? Or what's some of the changes that you would make to ENCV? But don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't forget to comment down below, because all of us can be agents of change that will reimagine America for decades to come. And share your opinions and what you think about ENCV, and let me hear some of your suggestions on what you could actually change under my system, because like what I said before, I'm going to repeat myself, all of us can be agents of change, and we all have great ideas to make to reimagine America, to create a far more perfect union that our founders that our founders kept dreaming of when they drafted the American Constitution. So don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, guys, this is the Young Centrist, and I am out.